we've got Kate from HomeStamp who will be on the panel later, so any questions about HomeStamp we can use. But like I said, it's a really easy to use tool to find good quality housing. So 2 key questions now that you know about accreditation. So when you're viewing a property, what questions are you going to be asking when you're going around these properties? First one, is the property accredited? Like I said, if you get a viewing on Thursday, it's going to be most likely to be accredited. But if you go with another landlord or letting agent, ask if it's accredited first, and then this will assure that you've got good quality housing if you say yes. And then also ask, is my deposit protected? Now, I'm going to come on to this about what that actually means. But the second one is really key question to ask when looking around these properties. So, deposits now under the law must be protected in the Tenancy Deposit Protection Scheme. There are 3 schemes: the Deposit Protection Service, My Deposits, and the Tenancy Deposit Scheme. And what these mean is that your money is, if you have a deposit, your money goes into one of these schemes and it is safe, and that you will be able to, at the end of your kind of tenancy, if you've got any problems, it's with kind of in a safe way so you can go through proper legal processes. We've got a representative here from the TDS, so any questions about deposits and that sort of thing, we'll ask you at the end. The second one is checking your tenancy agreement. You've got to remember that this is a legal contract for your tenancy, for where you're going to live, and it outlines what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. So if you do have a pet dog, make sure that you can bring your dog to the house. Make sure that pets are allowed in your tenancy deposit, that sort of thing. And it tells you what each party is expected to do. So what the landlord's expected to do, what the tenants expected to do. This week, the Advice Centre is running pop-up advice centres across campus, which are highlighted on the Housing Week timetable. And you can, if you think about the property, you can get them to check it out. Or any time that you are looking at a house, if you get the tenancy agreement, you can go to the Advice Centre, get one of our advisors to help you go through it. Make sure that you've gone through it and read through it properly before you sign anything. You don't want you signing anything that might come back later. So, KTV, Kent Television, one of our student groups, has kindly put together a special edition of The Through the Keyhole. And this is kind of what to expect from a student property and giving you some advice. So, let's do this.
So it's that time of year again, and our students need to find ourselves a house. If it's your first time, then don't panic, because the University of Kent and the Union are always here to help. In this video, we are going to give you some top tips, as well as show you what a typical student house looks like off campus. Are you ready? Let's go through the student keyhole. Now, if this is your first time viewing student properties, then you may have to slightly lower your expectations, as you're not at home anymore. The typical compromises could be location, size, and some of the furnishings. But don't forget, it's pretty easy to make things look homely. This is your typical student kitchen. Not just because it's slightly smaller and the cooker is a little bit old, but the cheap alcohol and the tea. And what we'll definitely find in student houses is a very eclectic selection of mugs. Now, we all know that the kitchen is the heart of the home, and that's the same for student houses, but it's also the place where things could go wrong. For example, a couple of months ago, our CO2 alarm went off and we were caught off guard. To prevent that, what we've done is written all important numbers on the inside of this door, next to our boiler. Don't encourage you to graffiti, so maybe get a notice board or a post-it note and stick it on the side. This is my living room, and it's the best bonus about not living on campus, because you've got that added space to socialise. Now, in the living rooms, although mine looks quite nice, we have added a few soft furnishings. For example, these sofas will want something straight out of the 1970s. There's nothing wrong with putting a little bit of personality into a room. Now, when you move into your new house, you're probably going to want to have parties and be socialising a little bit more, but especially as you're not on campus anymore, try to be considerate to your neighbours. Perhaps even pop round and just let them know you're going to have a few people over.
And this, my favourite room of the house, my bedroom. When we're moving into a new house, your bedroom is really important. Not just because this is where you're going to sleep. It could save you a little bit of extra money. If you're on a really tight budget and you're moving house with your friends, then look at houses with different sized rooms. For example, I have a big room, but I pay an extra £1. My friend Ella upstairs has a smaller room, which will save some money. Also with your new room, feel free to put some furnishings in and make it as homemade as possible, but check with your landlord for exactly what you're allowed to do. Well, obviously this is my bathroom. My top thing about doing bathrooms is it's probably the most difficult room to keep clean, especially if we're with boys. Now, if you want to keep it healthy, I'd say make a cleaning worker, and then each week you can be responsible for a different room, but it just means that you haven't got to argue about whose turn it is this week.
My favourite thing about my student house is my lovely garden. It means I've got a place to sunbathe, my housemates can have a kick around, and we can have barbecues in the summer. We're lucky enough to have a gardener that comes around once a month to cut our grass. But if you don't, try and keep the garden tidy, and remember that outside, noise travels further. Now, my usual advice is to start looking for your house as soon as the new year hits. As much as I agree with that, don't feel rushed into getting the first house you view. Take your time. Students' money is as good as anyone's money. For any further help on absolutely anything to do with housing, see the links below. But for now, get out of my house.
So there we are, there, KTV, helping us see what typical student house is. So yeah, like you can check out that video on their YouTube page to kind of get any of the information. Or like they said, the link at the bottom, kenunion.co.uk/advice, and be able to help you with any advice questions there. So now you've looked at your property, you've checked and signed the contract, and you want to know what to do next. So there's different things that you need to have a look at. Moving in, finding out when your moving date is. Some properties may be the 1st of July, some may be in August, some may be the 1st of September. If you want to stay in Canterbury over the summer, make sure that you get an early start, or that you can move in early with your landlord. Sometimes over the summer, if you don't move in until September, they'll also do like half rent and stuff. But check it out with one of our advisors to see what the case is. Relationship with your landlord. Make sure that you're on good speaking terms with them, just in case you need any work to do to your house, or that you need something fixing. So in my second year in our house, we had a lot of students coming to check out the property because we weren't going to live there the following year, and you know, we must have had like 40 groups around our house, and we were getting like a lot of disruption coming through, and you know, we were on really good terms with our landlords, and at the end they actually brought us a box of chocolates and a bunch of flowers to say sorry for disrupting us. So make sure that you are on these good relationships, and also remember when you're looking around the property that someone's probably currently living there as well. So you know, be courteous of the people that live there. Build some budgeting. We're going to go on to later, but just saying that there's different ways in which your bills can work out in a shared house. So some landlords and letting agents will do bills packages, Sometimes it's you pay it separately. I know there's various different ways in which students kind of work out how to pay their bills. In the houses that I've lived in, we've always done it through a shared bank account, but Corinne's going to explain later different ways about how to budget and sort out with bills. And the last thing that Daisy mentioned in the video there was that remember that you're now living off campus. You're part of the community now. So when you move in, go and meet your neighbours, go around, say hello, introduce yourselves. Make sure you're on good terms. Always a good icebreaker is go ask them what day the bins go out and what's the recycling kind of pattern for your area. And if you have a good relationship with your neighbours, then if you are going to have a party, you can put around just to say next week it's so and so's birthday, we're going to have a party. We just wanted to warn you in advance, and they're most likely going to be fine with that because you've got that good relationship. They can also help you with different things. So last year, where I was living off campus, we got burgled, and the neighbours were really helpful because they were there over Christmas and they were able to help the police. But also remember you're part of the community too, so get involved with local community groups, get involved with the residents association that you live in. You're part of these communities and you have a say as a resident as well, so really good opportunity to get involved there. So, like I said, we've got this, one of the first events of Housing Week. Throughout the week we've got loads of different kind of events happening. You can check them out at kentunion.co.uk/Housing Week. Tomorrow we've got the pop-up advice from 12 till 2. And Darwin in DS11, so Darwin Seminar Room 11. And Darwin and Wolf Student Committee are going to be there from 2 till 3. So any questions that you want to ask them, maybe where their experiences of where's the best place to live off campus, or how they sorted out bills, you can have an informal chat with two of the student committees there. So Wednesday we've got the Pop-up Advice Centre and Rutherford Student Committee meet up in Rutherford close to 19, and the pop-up advice is 12 till 2 and the student committee is 2 till 3. Then Thursday we've got the big event from Darwin Conference Suite. We have 11 till 3, we have the housing fair. We're going to have loads of advice stalls and we're going to have some landlords and letting agents there with accredited properties. You can go along and get some viewings there. We also have some advice centre presentations from 11 till 1 and 1 till 3 in DLT1 and DLT2, so another opportunity there. Friday we've got pop-up advice in Keynes, just in the red room next to the play bar, and then from 12 till 2 as well, we've got a find a housemate with Homestamp, and Homestamp's going to be there. Kate and her team are going to be there to help you find a housemate, get to meet other people. We've also got, really importantly, I think one of the most important things that you can do when you're trying to find a property off campus is managing your money in your student house. It's quite a daunting thing to move off campus, but we've got a stand-out training session which you can sign up online or come during the day, and it's in KLT3, so just down the corridor, and that's 11 till 12, and that's titled Managing Money in Your Student House. You can either sign up on Kent Union on the E&V toolkit, or you can turn up on the day, but that's a really invaluable section to go to, so if you're going to go to anything else, so go to that one. So yeah, Housing Week is with the Advice Centre, part of Kent Union, and Kent Hospitality as well, the accommodation office helping us out as well. So, before we go to the panel, I'm just going to introduce everyone and get them to come to the front. So, how are we going to do this? We've got, we'll go through this sense. We've got Leslie, she's one of our advisors at Kent Union. We've got Derek here and Jackie, and they're from the accommodation office from the university. So if you've had any things on campus, these are probably the people you've spoken to. We've got Kate here from Homestamp, from the Housing Accreditation Scheme. We've got Corinne, also another advisor. We've got Chris from the TDS, And we've got Helen, who's just a student. She's involved in quite a lot. But if you've got any questions about like her experiences of living off campus, Helen's lived in ridiculous houses, like 10-bedroom houses and stuff. So she's on that. So we've got some questions here, and then on here, and then we can go around the mic. I'll just do it from here. Okay, so the first question that we're going to go to is to Chris. It's going to be like, who's going to get this? And the question is, what can TDS do if my landlord doesn't return my deposit?
If your landlord withholds your deposit, if your landlord withholds your deposit, is it working?
Is it on?
Hello? Yeah, okay. Okay, again. If your landlord withholds your deposit unfairly, then the tenancy deposit scheme, along with the other deposit protection services, DPS and My Deposits, provide a free adjudication service. Basically, that means that you can come to TDS and provide us with evidence like photos or whatever and tell us why you think it's unfair, how your landlord is taking money from you. Now, it is up to your landlord to justify why they're taking any money from your deposit. You must always remember that even though you're not holding the deposit, it is actually your money, which is why your landlord needs to justify to you. And if you think that they're not justifying it, then come to TDS and an independent adjudicator will decide who gets how much.
The next one is for Leslie. What should I do? What should I look out for in my contract?
Well, contracts, they can be short and long. You don't even have to have a contract to have a tenancy agreement. It's a little bit complicated. But there are quite a few things I'd like you to think about when you get your contract from your landlord for your property. A couple of things I've written down here. I mean, one of the things I would like you to think about is whether or not you have a joint and several contract. And what that means is whether you are all on one contract, and therefore one tenant, or whether you have separate contracts. That has implications, legal implications for you, which you can find out more about in the booklets that you've got. I'd also like you to think about summer rent. I think we touched on that. Megan was talking about that. Have a look at the wording of the contract to make sure that it's very clear about how much money you have to pay, when you have to pay it, because of course, if there's a clause in the contract that suggests that there's interest charged if you pay late, and your money's due to be paid, for example, on the 1st of January for the 3 months, it may be that you actually accrue interest if you're waiting for your student loan to arrive. All of those things we'd like you to consider negotiating with the landlord before you sign the contract. There's many more things. What I'd like you to do is read through it and come and seek advice. Come and see us at one of the pop-up sessions. Come and see us in the advice centre with your specific questions about your contract. But just be aware of what you're signing, because they can be very wordy. And just watch out for the clauses. They're the common ones, but there are other things that do occur. So come and see us. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Next one we've got here is, what does it mean if a house is accredited? Kate, do you want to take this on?
Hello. So an accredited property is a property that meets certain health and safety standards, and if you're in an accredited property, the landlord has also agreed to treat you fairly as a student tenant, and they've agreed to follow our code of conduct in how they manage their property. Also, if you run into any problems with your landlord, you can always come to me and I will help support you through that process. So if you've got a landlord that's unresponsive when things break down or something like that, you can call me and I can kind of mediate between you and your landlord.
Next one, Corinne. Should I go all-inclusive bills or separate bills?
Hi. This is a big question. A lot of students come to us and ask about. It will actually say in your tenancy agreement whether bills are included or not. Some people prefer to have all-inclusive bills, especially if you're not very good at budgeting and you're not very good at having enough money left at the end of the month, etc. If they're included, it avoids you having to pay large bills when they come in and panic because you haven't got the money to pay them. And it also stops any friction between tenants about who has used what, who has used more of that than the other one, and also any confrontation if tenants don't want to pay their share of the bill. The cons is with all-inclusive ones is that you probably won't be able to change your provider with utility bills. It will be set by the landlord. You may also end up paying a little bit more than if you're actually just paying separate bills that are not all-inclusive, because the landlord will probably have factored in any price increases to the bill package. You need to be aware, though, when you look at your tenancy agreement, have to be very careful, because sometimes there will be a cap on the bills, and if you go over that capped amount, you will then be liable to pay the extra. Separate bills, if you're not all-inclusive, you'll only be paying for exactly what you've used. It's easier to switch provider if there is an agreement with the landlord. You're allowed to do this. And also, it's quite good to get an awareness of actually how much bills cost and the consumption that you're using. So if anybody's sort of particularly environmentally keen on working out how much gas and electricity they're using, it's quite good. And it's also quite good use for future budgeting if you're going to budget. The only cons with separate bills would be that they could arrive as your loan's running out at the end of term, and all of a sudden you've got to find the money. I always recommend that you, as a household, if you're doing this, you put some money into a joint account with all your names on it, so that when the bill does come in, you've already factored in enough money to cover the bill, and then there's no arguments. The other thing I would just point out is if you are paying separate bills, that you get all the tenants' names on that bill, and that way you're all equally liable if it's not paid. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne. So we've had a question in. If you've got any more questions, John's going to pick them up. If you've got any more kind of questions, I don't know if this is a Corinne or a Leslie or a both, but I'll read it out and someone can answer it. Do you have any advice for a couple wanting to rent a one-bedroom property on a budget? One is a full-time student and the other one works.
Thank you. Now, this is an interesting question. There are quite a lot of facets to this, so I would be strongly encouraging this person to come and see the Advice Centre to have a more specific conversation. But generally, some of the things that need to be considered in this situation is that the house will not be exempt for council tax because of the non-student in the property. It will mean that the non-student will attract 75% of the council tax for that property. So something to be aware of. Also, something else to be aware of, there are less one-bedroom properties in the student market. And you know that there's quite a distinctive student market, you may be becoming aware of that, and certain landlords who we accredit. It may be more difficult to find a one-bedroom property because generally the model, I think Megan was suggesting this, is the larger property, 2, 3-bedroom properties. So it may be harder to find a student property, and then you may be dealing with the general housing market. There are quite a lot of other implications. There might be some financial implications Corinne wants to consider. Any particular financial implications? Okay. We would strongly recommend that the person comes to see us for some specific advice and a much broader discussion about this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question that's come in is, what and how do we get guarantors?
Well, rent guarantors, yeah. Most landlords and agents will ask you to sign a contract, and they'll also ask within the contract that you provide details of a UK-based rent guarantor, usually family members, parents in most cases. This is in case you as a student runs away, doesn't pay any bills, they can then chase someone else to pay the unpaid bills. So it's some reassurance for the landlord that they're going to get their rent and get the bills covered. Now, some students don't come from the UK, don't have family members in the UK. If any students are paying overseas fees, the University of Kent can help by acting as a rent guarantor, but the university cannot act as a rent guarantor for all students. So the university cannot act as rent guarantor for home students or those paying, or EU students. In those cases, we'd recommend that you try to negotiate with the landlords or agents. What they often do if people can't provide a UK-based rent guarantor, they will ask for a full year's rent up front in advance before they would allow you to take the property, which in many cases can be unaffordable for you as a student or your families. If that's the case, we'd suggest you negotiate with those landlords or agents and maybe offer perhaps up to 3 months rent in advance. If they won't accept that, then I'd suggest that you need to walk away from that property. Let us know that the accreditation scheme or the accommodation office, if you do face that difficulty, because it's something we're trying to break down the local property market, so that if they're advertising accommodation to let to students, that they should be able to let it to all students without demanding a full year's rent up front in advance, which is pretty unaffordable for most people nowadays. I think that covers most of the aspects of it.
Yeah, thank you. So the next question we've got here is, why is it important that my deposit is protected?
Well, first of all, because it's the law, which is quite an important part of it. But also the reason that deposit protection law actually came in was because a lot of tenants were getting treated unfairly. At the end of the tenancy, the landlord was keeping back money from their deposit for things which they shouldn't have been paying for. So even if they'd left the property, spotless and hadn't damaged anything, the landlord was unfairly keeping money behind. So now the deposit has to be protected, so that if your landlord does try and keep money from you unfairly, you can challenge it without having to go to court. The adjudication service, which I talked about earlier, the dispute resolution, is for free, so you don't have to pay for it, unlike going to court, which will cost you thousands of pounds and probably 6 months. You can get a dispute with your landlord sorted out with us in about 30 days. It's also in that there can be very rare circumstances in which landlords might go bust. You might have seen a few headlines about letting agents who have taken lots of deposits, not protected them, they've got into financial troubles and they've used all their tenants' deposits to try and pay off their debts. And then obviously there's lots of very unhappy tenants. If the deposit is protected as it should be, then even if your letting agent or your landlord goes bust or something bad happens, you can still be 100% sure that your deposit will be safe and you'll get your money back at the end of the tenancy.
Has anyone got any questions that we'll take from the floor? I've got some frequently asked questions. You might not think it because you don't know what it means, but when you're looking around a property, these kind of things will come up. I'm going to Helen first and just kind of say your experiences of renting in the private sector. You're in your third year now, so you've experienced it for a couple of years. Do you want to kind of give us a story?
Okay. In my first year, I lived in Parkwood Flats, so everything was pretty easy on campus. You pay when your student loan comes in, and all your bills are included. In my second year, I lived in the middle of town in a 9-bed house with 6 boys and 2 girls, and my bills were included then, and I still have an ensuite, so I was quite lucky. And then this year, I got away from the boys, and I live with 3 girls, and I pay my bills separately, and I live in between town and uni, and it's beautiful. And I saw it actually at the housing fair, which is on Thursday. So go along to that, that's where I found it. And I'm keeping it, so you're not having it. Yeah, so I've lived in pretty much everything. If anyone has any questions about crazy housemates, I can answer that as well. No?
Yeah. Okay, so another one that we've got here is what are the implications of renting on a joint contract?
You recall just a little bit earlier on we were talking about the differences between sort of having an individual contract or having a contract as a group. And one of the biggest implications is that you are responsible for the rent and behaviour of all of your joint tenants. So the message I'd like to give you tonight is that you need to think carefully about who you rent with, I think, to make sure that you're not signing yourself into a legal financial responsibility with someone who may not be able to stay, or you may not get on with, or something like that. So just think carefully about who you rent with. And if you're not sure, find a property with individual contracts within it, and that makes it easy for you to leave that property if that's what you decide to do. Just most of the time it goes absolutely brilliantly, but we do meet people in the advice centre, so I may be a little cynical because I see the sharp end of it when it goes wrong, and for every person I see where it goes wrong, of course there's 20 others where it's gone absolutely brilliantly. But you just need to be aware that it can be an issue for some students.
Thank you. Next one is for Marie. Can I switch my utility suppliers?
This is another sort of hot topic at the moment. It's a great idea to switch utility providers in this day and age with all the comparison websites. So you've got the tools out there to do it. The first thing you need to do is actually read your contract to see if there's anything in your contract that says you're allowed to do this. If you are allowed to do it, great. Get on the comparison website, find a good deal. You need to then let your landlord know in writing that you're going to do this. You need to give him the information about who you've gone with, what the scheme is, the start dates, and any other information that he needs. That's sort of common courtesy to do that, but put it in writing and keep a copy yourself. There is currently some hot debate about what to do if there's nothing mentioned in the tenancy agreement about switching providers. And I don't really want to go into it too much because there could be some implications, and it's currently being looked into. So I think if it's not in there and you are thinking about doing it, I would suggest you come into the advice centre and see one of the advisors and run it by us. We've got a drop-in session we run every day between 1 and 3 on the weekdays, so you can pop in then if it's just a quick question. It could lead to you having to pay admin fees and to switch back to the original ones. So it's just something you need to just be aware of. But even if you do, and you do switch, get it in writing again and provide the landlord with all the written details.
Okay, thank you. The next one is for Kate. We kind of mentioned it already, but it's the question was, I need to find others to make up the group. What can I do? So how can HomeStamp help students find a house?
Okay, on HomeStamp we have a message board service, which is basically a forum. So if you email me at homestamp@kent.ac.uk, and you can get a password for the message board, and then you can leave messages for other students who might be in a similar position to you, and you can reply to the messages that are already on there as well. Yeah, and on Friday we also have a drop-in session for you guys to come along and potentially meet some people in the same situation and get some housemates that way. Okay.
Another question that I've got, I don't know who this is going to be aimed at, but I'm just going to put it out there. So if you're looking around a property and you've asked your landlord, the potential landlord, is my deposit protected, and they say no, what do you do then? You really want that house, but obviously they're against the law to not have it. Kind of, what do you do then?
Well, I would say don't touch them with a barge pole. If you go to any landlord or letting agent that doesn't know where your deposit's going to be protected, or say that it's not going to be protected and it should, don't go near them, because it's an important legal requirement that they protect your deposit. If they're not going to protect your deposit, what else are they doing which isn't within the law? Even if it's a nice house, I would say it's not worth the risk.
So what was is if there's anything anyone else kind of want to say, maybe Jackie or Derek, kind of advice you could give.
One of the things you've probably noticed when you've been looking at ads are these admin fees. A lot of the big landlords now, because there's a lot of paperwork entailed in putting deposits in a tenancy deposit scheme, if they've got this couple of, or 2 or 3 landlords in Canterbury who've got a portfolio of over 100 properties, so they can't be fussed to do all the paperwork, so they say we don't take a deposit. That's absolutely fine, they're entitled to do that. However, if they do take a deposit and they call it a deposit, then they must, as Chris has said, they must lodge it with one of the government schemes. If, however, they choose not to, be very careful of the admin fee, because that could be very high. Because really, they're trying to offset what they would have normally taken in a deposit in case anything goes wrong or the house is trashed or whatever. They will take it surreptitiously as a very large admin fee. That admin fee really should cover just drawing up a contract and perhaps doing a reference for your guarantor. So if you put your parents down, they would do some sort of referencing, which doesn't cost very much at all. So that, you know, I've seen these admin fees anything from £40, £60 from small landlords up to £350, which is effectively a month's rent deposit, but they're calling it something else. So be very careful. When they advertise, when letting agents advertise a property, they are, I think it came in a few months ago, legally they must show on the advertisement how much the admin fee is. So just there, and if it is a lot, just question them, just say, can you just tell me, break it down for me and tell me why it's so much. And if you just think it's, extortionate, walk away. There's lots of agents and there's lots of landlords in Canterbury, so don't be pressurised. I know they will pressurise you and also your peers will, haven't you found somewhere yet? Just step back. It's a big step and you're going to be paying that money for a year and that big lump sum up front, more to the point. And most of them you'll find as well are non-returnable. So if there's 4 of you and then something happens, you pay your £125, £130 and it falls apart, the agreement, before you sign, they will keep that. So when you go to the next property, you've got to pay it again. So think very carefully and look at those prices and just ask them, ask lots of questions. That's the only advice I'd give to anything tonight, is just keep asking questions. Ask questions of the people where you go to the house. I mean, don't bombard them, but they're the ones who've been with the landlord for a year or so and they know the property and the area. They're the good ones to ask. Ask lots and lots of questions.
I'll just say a bit, following on from what Jackie said there about going and doing viewings. If you're going to go and start looking at houses, I mean, on Thursday, come to the housing fair. There'll be lots of landlords and agents there. They'll be showing you pictures of their houses and arranging viewings with you. Try and get everyone in your group to go along to the viewing. The landlord is going to say to you things like, well, do you want the house or not? If you do want the house, are you going to be ready to sign a contract, everyone in the group? Along with the contract, they'll want you to hand over quite a large amount of money. So if it's a good house and it's a great landlord, you're going to want to do that very quickly. So are you organised to do that? When you're doing the viewings, I've often had landlords say to me that students go and look around the house. They often make remarks about what they see in the house and how the current tenants are living in there, but they never ask those tenants, how have you got on living here? What's the best bits of living here? What's the worst bits? Because as you say, they're the ones who are using the product at the moment that you may be living in next year. So do ask them, what's it like living here? If you can get the landlord or agent out of the way, try and ask them, what's the landlord or agent like? Are they fair? Are they reasonable? Because that's the best reference you're going to get for any property that you may find.
Yes, sir. Another thing that I would say that I always experienced when I was getting properties is if some of the bedrooms are different sizes to others, sometimes the largest bedroom might be £5 more a month, sometimes that's the way it's done. If it is you've got a 4-bedroom house and you've got 2 that are kind of medium sized, one that's large and one that's small, obviously that is everyone automatically wants a big room, like hands down, everyone wants a big room. So, if you can sort it out amongst your group, try and work out. If not, to save any grief, I would always say pick it out of a hat. That would be my advice. That would be my thing for the day is, when it comes to picking a room, once you've done your tenancy checks and you've got your deposit and you've questioned about, about the admin fees, and you've done all that, when it gets to getting into a room, that's what everyone, that's what breaks friendships, about the size of the room. I think Helen will probably agree with that one. So yeah, pick it out of the hat.
Do we want to go down the line and say kind of your top tip for these students to go away with tonight? What their one top tip is?
Well, my one top tip would be to look carefully at what you're signing. Just look at the contract, just spend some time just going through the clauses, and if you've got any questions before you sign it, either ask the landlord You're perfectly entitled to get them changed if that's what you want, if the landlord will agree. And just come and see us and get some advice if you're not sure. Step away from something if you don't like the landlord, if you don't like the clauses, if you don't like the property. If you're concerned, you're going to have to be with this person for a long time, you know, a year potentially, you're going to be dealing with this landlord. Step away from it if you've got some concerns.
I suppose the best advice I can give is if you're going to rent a house together as a group, try and stay a group together through the entire year. So do avoid big fallouts, try and be a good neighbour, do your share of the washing up, the cleaning, keep communicating with each other, just try and keep the whole thing on track. I think we've often dealt with students where things have just gone so badly wrong that they're then stuck in a situation of one of them wanting to leave a house but having to face the prospect of paying the rent for the rest of the year and paying to live somewhere else as well, which is the worst of all worlds. So just try and keep things moderate and don't let things get out of control.
I think I'd just reiterate what I've said before about asking lots of questions. I mean, obviously, as I said, the most opposite is of the landlord, everything in that, the sort of legal side of it. But also ask, before you get your group, or you think you've got your group together, ask each other the question, you know, what are we actually looking for? I mean, you could have completely different ideas. You think, oh, we're just going to look at a house, but houses vary so much, and area, make sure you're all thinking as one, and there's just not, you know, sometimes we see it and, you know, something happens and it falls apart and we say, well, actually I didn't even want to live there, but I didn't want to stay because the others did. And it is difficult if you're getting sort of pressure and all the other, you know, 4 of you, 3 of them all saying, oh yeah, yeah, it's easy to get swept along with it, but if you don't say anything then, it's, you know, before you know it, you're signed up and you're not happy, and that's the worst thing, is to be, you know, have worries about your accommodation when you've got so many other things to concentrate on. So just ask questions of everything. If you're self-even, do I want to live, really want to live with these people? So, you know, that's my advice.
I think apart from the obvious one of making sure that your deposit is protected, I'd also say that when you actually move into the house, it's very important that you check the inventory and schedule of condition which your landlord is likely to give you, basically, which is a list going through every room of the property, detailing the condition and the contents of every room, to make sure that at the end they can tell you whether you've damaged anything and therefore how much money you might owe them from the deposit. Now, if there's any damage or anything unclean in the property which isn't listed in the inventory at the start, you might be opening up yourself to risk of having to pay for it at the end. And this has happened to me when I was a student. There was a huge disgusting stain in the hallway which wasn't listed in the inventory, and the landlord tried to charge us for it, and it was thankfully because one of my flatmates' parents had actually gone around and taken photos of the whole house. That we could actually say, actually, that stain was there when we moved in, so actually we don't have to pay for this. So make sure when you move in, check through the inventory, make sure it's accurate, and bring up any damage or cleaning issues at the very start before you sign the inventory.
My tip would just be to make sure that it's a home stamp approved property. Not all properties across Canterbury are, but we're increasing that all the time. So just make sure it's home stamp approved. And come along to Housing Fair on Thursday, make use of that.
Budgeting. One word. I think now you should be looking at what your budget's going to be for your rent. So you should know how much your loan or grants or any other income is going to be for next year. So you know how much you're going to be able to afford rent-wise. I think you should draw up a budget once you move into the property. And try and stick to it as far as possible, sort of taking into account things like you've got rent or your utility bills possibly, your food, your unforeseen costs that you might not think about for emergencies and things like that. I am running a session, as Megan said, on Friday about managing money in your student house, which will go into a bit more in depth about budgeting. It's not as boring as it sounds, we do make it quite fun. And who's responsible for bills, what happens if they're not paid, etc. But my one word is budget.
I think mine would probably be think about who you're living with. Like we've already said, you could live in the nicest place, and if you've got a housemate that's a pain in the arse, you're not going to want to go home, and you're paying a lot of money for it. Or you could live in somewhere that's not really very nice and have the best housemates and have the best year ever. So think about who you're living with, definitely.
And I'd say that my top tip about this whole process is don't panic. You know, it's quite a scary thing to rent a property off campus for the first time, as I imagine this for many of you it will be. You know, we're all here to help. You can talk to the advice centre, you can talk to the accommodation office, you can talk to myself. You know, we're all here to help you. We wanted to make it as easy as possible for you, and kind of make sure that you get the best property you can and that you have the best time in that property as you possibly can. So, thank you everyone for coming. Like I said, check out the timetables online about other events that are happening. And just one quick thing, if you, you know, at the minute we have the leadership elections nominations open for Kent Union. So if you want to be stood here next year giving this presentation, doing stuff about housing, doing stuff about money, safety on campus, you know, nominate yourself to stand for Vice President welfare. We've got the other roles, we've got Union President, we've got Vice President Sport. So if you're thinking sport and you want to make sport better for the students at Kent, nominate yourself for sport. Vice President Activities covers volunteering, societies, student media, and the Vice President Education obviously covers your education, course rep system, faculties. If you've got any questions, get in contact with any of the full-time officers, and we'll be able to help you. So nominations are now open. And thank you ever so much for coming, and if you could just thank our panel for coming tonight, that'd be great.